Good morning, goddammit. Piss and Vinegar, day 163. Exhausted. Didn't train yesterday because I've just been doing too much mixed martial arts. And doing mixed martial arts, I've lost I lost 2 kilos in like a week and a half just from the extra energy expenditure. It's excellent, but I am tired. And yeah, so training today, chest and triceps. And today I wanted to talk about Mike Mentzer versus Arnold Schwarzenegger. So this is something I've seen a bit recently, and honestly I think the topic is silly, but because I think it's silly and misunderstood, I wanted to talk about it and give my insights, because I think people are blowing things out of proportion and not taking contextual aspects into consideration, and it's ridiculous. It's like you're using these two flawed individuals as an argument for volume versus high intensity, which is insane. They are very much the golden icons of the theories, right? Arnold's the perfect example of a volume guy doing a lot of sets and reps, and Mike's the perfect example of high intensity. He did the least amount of sets and reps out of high intensity, and he was the original, successful bodybuilder within that parameter. So, they are a good icon of it, but they're not necessarily a good example, and I'll get into that in a bit, but let me just warm up. So normally I drop set these, but further I get into the cut and the more shit I got on my plate business-wise and MMA-wise, the less recovery I think I'm going to have. And really, I'm not even necessarily looking to gain strength on certain movements, and not necessarily looking to gain size in certain muscles, just maintenance. And anything beyond that is just eating into recovery. Like, I normally drop set these, but that's in a bulk when I'm looking to gain mass and strength. Whereas here, I'm maybe going to gain some strength if I'm lucky and do everything right. And that's one of the benefits of high intensity training, is you can gain strength through a cut. But yeah, also I'm just tired. So I just want to put my mental effort into the set at hand, and rather than having the subconscious, understanding that there's a set following this, and it's like, that's daunting. I'd rather just put it all into the one set and then move on, especially with compound movements. The chest flyers and, lighter tricep extensions, I'll drop set for sure, but heavy compound movements throughout the rest of the cut, very likely I won't be doing drop sets. I'd probably do a 4th rep or 2 if I had someone to train with, but drop sets not so much. God damn. All right, so the Arnold versus Mike Mentzer thing. There's so many aspects you can go about this. So where to start? I mean, first of all, for the people saying, high intensity doesn't work because people argue this. Mike was mentally ill. He was a meth addict. He wasn't as successful as Arnold. That's ridiculous, right? Like, let's address these one at a time. Mike Mentzer was a meth addict. Yes. Does that mean that high intensity doesn't work? No. It's the ultimate straw man or ad hominem attack. right? And I don't even think Mike's necessarily the best idol of high intensity, nor do I think Arnold's the best idol of volume, even lesser so. But if you're going to go off character, that's ridiculous. Just because someone's got a character flaw or a mental flaw doesn't mean that training wasn't a good philosophy, right? First of all. Secondly is the success thing, right? Mike Mentzer wasn't as successful as Arnold, thus high intensity doesn't work. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? All right. Politics aside, Arnold, robbed Mike of 1980 Olympia. Everyone knows that by now. That aside, yeah, Arnold was more successful, but a lot of that's politics, for one. Two, Arnold was 6'2", Mike was 5'8". Height had a huge difference back then. Now they don't judge height anywhere as much. If you look at their physiques objectively, subjectively, I actually prefer Arnold's physique. And don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on Arnold. Arnold's the man. I wouldn't be lifting weights if it wasn't for Arnold. Mike, I didn't start lifting weights because of Mike. So don't get me wrong, Arnold's the man, and I liked his physique more. But objectively, Mike had a better physique. He had no weaknesses. He didn't have anything necessarily special. Arnold had the incredible chest, the biceps, all the things that I personally think, wow, fucking sick. But he didn't have the legs. He didn't have the trap development. He didn't have the glutes. He didn't have, the back thickness as much. He didn't have the delts even close. The traps were pretty much, their traps were there, but the difference is Mike was incredibly well-rounded and objectively had a better physique. And if they were judged nowadays based off the standards now, Mike would win. Without politics also, because obviously in 1980, regardless of who you think had a better physique in general, in that era, Mike won. And that was politics. So there's politics there. There's a different way of judging there. And let's just say Mike did have an inferior physique and wasn't as big. Either way, the man had a fucking incredible physique. Let's just say he didn't have as good a physique. That's very well could just straight up be genetics. It's not training necessarily, because it's just one person. We're just using one person versus one person, not a pool of people, one person, and that's ridiculous. So Mike, objectively better physique, so that's silly, and we shouldn't base whose training philosophy was better off that anyway. If Arnold did high intensity and didn't have the lacking muscles that you often do get from way too much volume, because you can't put intensity into these muscles that you typically cram in at the end of a workout, by all means Arnold might even have a better physique, right? So that's ridiculous. Another straw man that just doesn't make any sense. And then as far as what was the third one? I forgot what the third one was, but it's insane to use these two people and say one works because the other one was more successful, even though objectively they were relatively the same as far as physiques go anyway. They both hit the pinnacle of physiques can get. If a hit didn't work, then how the fuck did Mike Mentzer get so fucking big, right? So that's that. That's ridiculous. And there's not much to say on that. And as far as, okay, in a natural context, you're a natural, what's gonna work better? Doing 2-day workouts that are like 2 hours long, like back and chest, rest, afternoon, shoulders, biceps, next day legs in the morning, and then at the end of the day, shoulders, like that's not gonna work for a natural. It barely works for people on steroids. And it's very well documented now that people, at least anecdotally, not documented, people always say Arnold, one, wasn't training the way he says he trained, the 2-a-day bullshit. It doesn't make any logical sense. You'd burn out so quick even on steroids. And two, he wasn't honest about his steroid use. He would talk about how he took fuck all Dynabol and test, and it's like, dude, he had like 3 heart surgeries, and people would often say he was on a shit ton of stuff, more than he later on went to say. And part of that might have been damage control. Maybe he just didn't want to tell the youth of his anabolic abuse in order for them to go abuse it themselves, whatever it is. Point is, he lied about 2 things. Mike, you can't catch him lying on anything. So there's an authenticity issue there. Again, no hate on Arnold, love Arnold, but I've lost my original point here. Oh, in a natural context, Mike Mentzer's training is going to work a hell of a lot more better than Arnold's. It's just a simple fact. And even if you're on steroids, it's going to work better. That training, that amount of volume and frequency is not going to work for just about anybody. And if it worked for Arnold, then fuck me, man. Imagine if he did high intensity training, he'd be fully recovered and he'd be making way more gains. And if we want to go off, well, who's more successful, who was bigger, another strong man, Dorian Yates crushes Arnold. Crushes him. But then the other problem is, I could say that and be disingenuous because Dorian had better genetics and he had human growth hormone and he had tren. If I didn't take that into contextual, awareness, the layman would be like, oh yeah, you're right. No, Dorian was bigger, so high intensity is better. No, both work. at the end of the day, who spent less time in the gym and what works more efficiently for naturals or people who don't want to spend fucking, 20 hours a week in the gym like Arnold did? High intensity training. Arnold, Mike, let's just say their physiques are exactly equal, which they're not. Mike's is better, but let's just say they aren't, right? Who spent less time in the gym? Mike. Mike spent like fucking 4 hours max in the gym. Dorian, who became bigger, granted training and growth hormone, spent also 3-4 hours a day in the gym. Whereas Arnold, a week in the gym. Arnold would spend that amount of time in a fucking day in the gym. I'd much rather be the guy training with far less time in the gym to get the same amount of results. And that's what we should really be looking at here. Who spent the least amount of time to get the same amount of results, if not better? Mike did. Mike won in that aspect. Mike didn't win in the long run, but we're not talking about meth addiction or movie stardom or politics or ad hominems and strawmans. We're talking about who did what and who achieved what, as far as just a objective physique level, no politics, nothing aside, just who trained the least and who had the better physique, or who did they have comparable physiques, and if so, who trained least? Mike did. And man, honestly, if you put Arnold, who had such incredible genetics and such an excellent physique, better than Mike in my opinion, put him on high intensity training, you would see an even better Arnold in my opinion. So such a silly debate, and I just thought I'd talk about it and put my perspective on it, because I see so many people saying the stupidest shit, especially the one where it's like, one was more successful, thus the other one doesn't work. Clearly it fucking works, man. So normally I take the bench to failure, total failure, but nursing shoulder injury, and I'm also just doing this one for ego. When I first started doing it, I felt the chest heaps with the close grip and the legs out, last and press, no momentum, higher reps. Now I'm not. I'm just feeling it. Straight delts, straight triceps. This is just an ego lift at this point. Really, I should drop it. I should do something else for the lower chest, mid chest. But man, it does hurt that my bench press is so shit. And really, if I fix my scapular winging and I fix my radial nerve issue on the left, then I'll probably be able to output way more power anyway, and the ego won't matter so much anymore, because I am objectively stronger than when I was a much heavier bench presser. Tricep extensions are better, dumbbell presses are better, or at least the same. And yet I'm way lighter than that time, and that might be partially it, but part of it also is just the shoulders can't output as much stability or strength. So anyway, not that great, but I'll make up for it with the pec flies, which smash my pecs. The next thing I really want to talk about is, in these two people, neither are good examples necessarily. Like, at the same time, don't get me wrong, I love Arnold, I really do. The reason I started lifting weights, so many fond memories watching the action movies as a kid with my old man. It's, it imprinted an early life, the idea of masculinity onto my brain, and it probably saved me from becoming what could have otherwise been in this new age as a man, right? It dug deep into me my dad did me a good service in that aspect. And Mike, if it wasn't for Mike, I wouldn't be doing high intensity training, because I wouldn't know about Dorian Yates. And I like Mike. I mean, Mike was a fucking genius of his time, but the problem is, Arnold was in the 60s and 70s and 80s a bit, but way outdated, and same with Mike. But granted, Mike had far more things in place than Arnold did, probably because he came a little bit later, and also Mike went on to correct himself many times later on, but even then he was off about plenty of things. Whereas Dorian came along and more or less perfected high intensity training. So, Mike walked so that Dorian could run. The point is, if you use Mike specifically as an argument against high intensity, you can strawman the fuck out of the guy. You can use the meth. You can use things like he used to advocate for static stretching before working out. But like static stretching, back in the 80s, we didn't know about that. It wasn't until the 90s, early 2000s, did we realize that static stretching lowered force output production, or, you know, just weird things like he would talk about. Oh man, it's been a while, honestly, since I really listened to Mike Mentzer, but the idea that you could put on most of the muscle you'll ever gain, if not like 99% of it in the first year of training. Like that one, no, you can't. Or he would argue that the Colorado experiment of the guy that gained 60 pounds in 3 months or whatever it was legit without steroids. Like that's insane. And that is cultish behavior. And it's on both sides. There's cultish behavior on high intensity and volume. And volume guys will say that high intensity doesn't work, even though demonstrably untrue, because it does fucking work. Because otherwise you wouldn't have Mike Mentzer's, Dorian Yates, me, thousands of clients from, you know, Jay Vincent, who's basically the new age high intensity forefront running guy. And then the high intensity guys that say volume doesn't work. Although, granted, I don't see a lot of high intensity guys that say volume doesn't work. They don't get so cultish that they straight up deny reality. Unlike volume guys, they'll deny reality for a marketing aspect a lot of the times. You have Mike Israetel, Alex Bromley. These guys will outright deny the effectiveness. I mean, granted, Israetel will give some leeway, but again, his brand is reps in reserve. It's volume. So advocating high intensity is not a good idea. And then he'll review Mike Mentzer's training and crush all the things that he was wrong about because it was the fucking 80s. That wasn't even necessarily related to intensity of effort anyway, and use that as a straw man as to why high intensity doesn't work. Alex Bromley is another example, and he does this even worse. And I don't want to get into it because I don't want to be negative, but he's an example of someone who straight up denies reality. And he will use strawmans and ad hominems as to why the broader range of high intensity doesn't work. It's ridiculous. This whole argument's crazy. Both work. If you do them right, they work. It's just that simple. And they work equally as well, very demonstrably so. And using, you know, I'm ranting. Let's get back into the workout. My apologies, my absolute dog shit phone ran out of storage, as ever, mid-set. Then I was just about to do tricep extensions, and I've just had an inkling, like a spider sense, and I went to check it, and then it was overheating. So I had to stick it in front of my aircon, and it's like 9 o'clock at night. It's like not even hot, like fucking piece of shit phone, man. Hopefully I'll be able to upgrade soon. So now the tricep extensions. Okay, so I think I made a short about this recently, but just quickly recapping it. When you're doing tricep extensions with, you know, over half your body weight, you should be pinning yourself to the floor, because otherwise you're going to be lifted up a little bit and it's going to take away from your ability to press strictly. Like there'll be like momentum, which will be either in your favor or against you. Inconsistent reps, falsely regress or progress, changing parameters for absolutely no reason. So I'm 86 kilos right now, I think. That's 50 kilos. It's enough to, you know, almost hang off it. It's, you know, it's counterweight me, let's just say that. So rather than being unstable, I'm really just gonna solidify myself to the floor. All right, last thing, overhead tricep extensions. Battery's about to die, I think, so let's just fucking get it done, boy. In closing, I'd say, don't idol worship. Mike's cool, Arnold's cool, flawed just like any other human is. So, you know, just because they said one thing that's from the 70s and 80s doesn't mean it's right. And just because they said some things that are wrong doesn't mean that the rest of the things that they said is wrong also. People love to crush Mike for the things he said wrong because he was in the 80s. There was plenty of things that they just didn't know back then. Doesn't take away from the fact that high intensity works. And vice versa, well, volume works. I can't take away from volume just because Arnold did it like a retard. Like, that would be ridiculous. That's straw manning, that's ad hominems. Don't look in that perspective, look logically. Look around agendas. Is Mike Israetel propelling reps in reserve because his marketing that's his marketing, reps in reserve. That's his brand, reps in reserve. Yes, so he's never gonna say that high intensity is optimal. Even if it was, even if he understood it was, he wouldn't, because it'd be going against his brand. He would lose subscriptions from his apps and shit, you know what I mean? No attack on him either. This is not an attack on anybody. I'm just trying to put perspective. Oh shit, why is that so heavy today? Everything else went up except for that lift. That lift is, seriously, that got fucked over. Alright, let's drop set that shit. Get the strips in that, get the stretch in that inner head. Perfect example, I'm a huge fan of Dorian Yates. I think he's the most correct on training out of anybody is. And yet I still disagree with him, because you don't have to idol worship these people. I have absolute respect to Dorian. I think he's correct in most things. And the things I disagree with him, he very well might still be correct, and I might just be wrong in my assessment of disagreeing with him. But if you intrinsically think something's wrong, then don't just blindly follow. Try yourself. You might find that it doesn't work for you and you were right. Or you were wrong. That's fine too. That's how you learn. Oh, shit. Definitely not the most intense session I've ever done. Exhausted today. Still intense though, still decent.